When you're writing, sometimes you will get stuck. You'll find yourself using the same types of sentence over and over again. Sometimes your writing will feel like it's stuck. You know those stories that you used to write when you were really young, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then I did the other thing. All of the sentences following the same structure, all of the sentences essentially doing the same thing, reporting action. So when you're told that you need variety in your writing, it comes in two forms, or at least two forms. Structural variety, different types of sentence structure, simple, compound, complex, and also different lengths, short, medium, and long sentences. And also the purpose of the sentence. We need variety within the purpose of the sentence. Not all sentences should describe or report dialogue or use figurative language. We need a wide variety of different types of sentence in our writing, serving different purposes. So the DADWAVERS acronym is a useful way of remembering some of these key things that sentences can do in stories. We practice these, and after a while we become fluid with them and fluent with them, and we can start to use them in more creative ways within our writing. But just to start, it's a good idea to practice this until you've internalized it, you've memorized it, you understand it, and then later you'll develop a feel, just as you have done in music or in sports that you play. We'll drill the skill and then in isolation, and then we'll weave it into our game. Now, to begin with, it's quite a long acronym, but don't worry, we have a few ways of breaking this down. But let's start. It's DADWAVERS, and it's the easy way to remember it. D for description, A for action, D for dialogue, W for where, A for adverb, V for verb, E for estimation of time, R for rhetorical questions, S for simile or metaphor, and the exclamation mark indicating an exclamation or onomatopoeia. So one way we could break this down is in the beginning, or if you're younger, you might start with just DAD, description, action, and dialogue. So you'll write a sentence or two for each of those, one after the other, and then you'll see your paragraph moves from description into action and then on to dialogue, ensuring that that paragraph will contain more than one type of sentence or sentences that serve one purpose. Once you've mastered that, or you're a little bit older, you might move on to DADWAV. Okay, and then we can see we've added in where, adverb, and verb. And of course, if you're older, a more sophisticated, skillful writer, you might use the full acronym, and good for you if you can, DADWAVERS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through step by step a little passage that I wrote for a story quite quickly, making sure that I used one of each type of sentence, or at least one. Right? Sometimes you might write a couple of sentences for each part. So let's take a look. So my story starts with a description, setting the scene. The monotonous drone of our Latin teacher hummed ceaselessly in the background as reluctant pencils scratched crude letters into well-thumbed copybooks. A little bit of scene setting there. The description orients the reader. Now the reader knows what's going on. Now, notice that I've set the scene, but I haven't just told the reader where this is set, but we can tell that it's set in a school. This is a little bit of use of show don't tell here. It's a Latin class. Sounds like not every school teaches Latin these days. In fact, it's increasingly difficult to find one if you're looking for Latin classes. So perhaps it's in the past, or perhaps it's at an illustrious private school of some sort. Notice that the description isn't necessarily about just the physical scenario that it's in. It's got a lot of emphasis here on sound. Monotonous drone, hummed, for example. Even the pencil scratching the crude letters, we can almost hear a scratch. It's slightly onomatopoeic. So when we think of description, we don't just think of describing what stuff looks like. We're very visually oriented often in our writing. Don't forget that we have 5 senses at least. And make sure you incorporate those into your writing. If we want to immerse the reader in our fictional world, we want to help them to perceive it through their senses. After all, that's how we know the world that we're in. We know what ice cream tastes like because we've tasted it. We know what smoky air smells like because we've smelt it. We know what a church bell sounds like because perhaps we've heard it. And remember, you don't need to say, I hear, I saw that. For example, if a church bell rings in the distance, of course you heard it because you certainly didn't smell it, right? So you can remove the I heard the church bells ring in the distance. You might just say church bells rang in the distance. And that will convey the sensory experience of the narrator, and thereby the reader gets to really immerse themselves. There's no filter between I heard. It's I'm experiencing the sound as the reader too, just like the narrator. So description sets the scene, orients the reader. You know, it's not just at the start of a story. Each scene will require a little bit of description. But we don't want to get stuck in description mode because storytelling is more than describing. It requires things to happen. It requires action. Now, the action of your story, the actions, the events should be connected through cause and effect to make sense. But don't get stuck in the description, move it on and get into the action. Here we go. With a thud and without warning, the classroom door flung open. Every head in the room spun in the door's direction to take in the dangerously red face of Mr. Dawson, the school principal. Okay, so the action here, it isn't a car chase or an explosion. It doesn't have to be melodramatic. It can be small action, it can be big action. Depends on your story, depends on what you're trying to achieve. From there, we don't want to get stuck just in the action. We do want to move things on. We want to make these characters come to life. We want to make them feel as if the reader is observing real people in action. And real people don't just do things, they of course speak. And there's where dialogue comes in. So a little bit of dialogue, again, adding variety and moving the story forward. Apologies for interrupting, Miss Cicero, Dawson managed to sputter. I require James Conway to come with me on a matter of some urgency. Now, dialogue's great for many things in storytelling. One, it can move the action forward or move the plot forward, as we can see here. Number two, it can add variety to the sentence purposes and the sentence structures, which clearly is why we're doing it to a large degree. Number three, it's difficult to punctuate correctly. So if you're getting ready for an exam, one efficient way of impressing an examiner in terms of technical accuracy and things like punctuation and grammar control is to be able to punctuate dialogue correctly or be able to write dialogue precisely and accurately. Now, from the dialogue, we're going to take a little bit of a zoom here. We're going to go inside from the perspective. We're going to switch here into the perspective of the narrator. Right now, we've got a lot of reported description and action and even the dialogue, the characterization of the nervous principal, or at least flustered. We're not sure quite why he's sputtering, but clearly something is going on. And we shift now into the narrator. From where I sat, the prospect of following Dawson was less than appealing. I couldn't tell if his sweaty, agitated state was a result of anger, panic, or something less concerning. Now, what's happened here is we're getting the scene from the perspective of the narrator. It's a first-person perspective. We've gone into the narrator's head and we're observing the scene. We've switched a kind of a location or a perspective here a little bit. Now, notice that the opportunity arises here for getting an insight into the character themselves. They're clearly a student, right? They're clearly the James Conway I mentioned before. Notice that it's Dawson that he refers to him as in his mind. This is clearly his thoughts, his internal monologue. And by calling him Dawson, removing the Mr., we get to understand that maybe there's a lack of respect on the student's part here. Not entirely uncommon, as you know. Then we go to adverb, warily. We go for a fronted adverb. Anytime we put a word or a phrase at the start of a sentence that doesn't have a verb or a subject, it isn't a clause, we get a comma after it. It's an introductory word before we get to the main part of the sentence. I got to my feet. So warily, I got to my feet. Now, a lot of writers don't like adverbs. Hemingway famously abhorred them, hated them very much. But we do want to show that we're able to use them on occasion. Just don't overuse them. Warily I got to my feet. My classmates continued focusing intently on their Latin scribbles. Then we go to verb. I shuffled after Mr. Dawson as he weaved his way. And actually, I think I would change that back to Dawson. Again, Mr. shows a bit of respect. Its absence reveals a lack of respect. So I've been a little bit inconsistent here. And of course, this is why proofreading and editing is so important. So I will, in my next draft, remove Mr. Note as he weaved his way through the echoing corridors to his office. Notice that the adjective echoing here is relating again to sound rather than just visual description. But we can surmise that these corridors are large, cavernous, maybe not a lot of furniture to soak up the sounds. Notice the importance of the verbs chosen here, shuffled rather than walked. Walked is a good example of a weak verb. Walked can mean anything. You could walk in any number of ways. Walked means moving forward by placing one foot in front of the other sequentially or in a series. But it doesn't tell you anything about the character, about their mood, about their feelings, about their intent. Shuffled does. It is also moving one foot in front of the other to move forward, but it implies that they're doing it reluctantly or they're doing it in low spirits. And of course, this suits the context of what's happening in the wider story. Okay, so estimation of time for the E. It wasn't long until I found myself standing in front of his desk. Self-explanatory. You might use a fronted adverbial like eventually or the next day or something like that. Something denoting time. Again, this helps to orient the reader to the timeline. But you don't have to over-labor it. Then we move on to rhetorical questions. Again, rhetorical questions, you'll know from persuasive writing, is often thought of as a tool for persuasive writing, and indeed it is very useful in that context. In storytelling, in narrative writing, it can be a useful way of jumping back inside the head of the narrator, specifically when writing the first person. And as we can see here with the rhetorical question, what was going on? Why was the principal's office on a Monday morning when I should have been conjugating the verbs of a dead language? Here, on reflection, probably best to italicize this to denote this is actual internal monologue, the thoughts of the character. So we can use italics to differentiate between the prose or the narrative, the descriptive writing. And then the dialogue is obviously punctuated with the speech marks. And then when we're going inside the head and hearing the actual thoughts of the character, italics are often a good way to do that. So as I'm going through this, I'm editing and proofreading, as you should be doing. As we know, a writing takes several drafts to get right. In the context of an exam, of course, you can't create several drafts, but what you can do is proofread and make some surface level changes and corrections as you go. So, the final letter here, S, for simile or metaphor, just a reminder that figurative language is one way that we can add spice and flavour and interest to our writing. Remember, the primary purpose of narrative writing is to entertain. One of the ways that we can entertain or make our writing more interesting is by the judicious use of figurative language devices such as simile and metaphor. And here we can see our example. With a glare as cold as ice, Dawson finally spoke. So, Conway, at last I have you in the palm of my hand, right where I want you. And as we can see, there's also dialogue here. We open with this simile at the start, and then we move into dialogue. So even though this section, if you like, this sentence is focused on the figurative language use of simile, it also includes dialogue. So we're not strictly speaking just only going to use description and then only going to use action. We will find verbs within the dialogue, we will find location within the description, and so on and so forth. But it's a reminder that these purposes should be served by various sentences to help bring variety and movement to your story. And then the final exclamation or onomatopoeia, We might have a sound effect, onomatopoeia. We might have an exclamation here. We've got a little bit of both. Just then, the door creaked open behind me. Now we can see here there's a little bit of a cliffhanger there. This would be then woven together and formatted correctly into a paragraph. You will, of course, make decisions based on certain needs. This may end up being more than one paragraph. We'll talk about how to format paragraphs in more detail in another session together. But for now, this is DADWAVERS. Try to use it consciously at the start, and as with most things, after we consciously practice something to the point of internalizing it, then we will naturally start to add these types of variety or various types of sentences to our work, bringing that much needed variety in our writing. Don't forget, there is a template available as a download in the description of this YouTube video, and you're very welcome to download it, and you'll get this template and you can use it to help the next time that you're writing a narrative. If you've enjoyed this, if you've got some value from it, please like and share and subscribe, and I hope to see you very soon.